Greetings, wanderers of the abyss. Today we're going to explore the most disturbing side of cinema, the world of cosmic horror. These movies don't work through simple scares. They work because they make you feel small, exposed, and uncertain about your place in the universe. The fear doesn't come from a killer you can run away from, but from the idea that something ancient, immense, and indifferent is always there, far beyond human understanding. Sometimes it never even shows itself, but the weight of its presence is enough to keep you awake at night. So let's begin, and take a look at the most disturbing cosmic horror movies you should know. The first movie we need to talk about is The Vast of Night, a small independent film that feels more disturbing than most big-budget horror. From the very beginning, it frames itself like a lost Twilight Zone broadcast, reminding us that what we're watching isn't just a story, it's a transmission. We're taken to New Mexico in the 1950s, to a town with barely 400 inhabitants, where the entire community is focused on a high school basketball game. But while the town is distracted, two people are about to stumble into something much bigger than themselves. Everett is a local radio announcer. Faye works the telephone switchboard, and together they start noticing the first cracks in reality. Strange power surges, lights dipping in intensity, phone calls breaking with interference. In the middle of one call, a terrified woman insists that something is moving in the skies, and then the real horror begins. A metallic frequency unlike anything they've heard before, a sound that doesn't belong on Earth. Everett decides to broadcast it live, asking if anyone recognizes it, and that decision pulls the entire town into the orbit of the unknown. A former soldier calls in, his voice steady but scarred. He explains that years ago, he was ordered to cover up a massive metallic object in the desert. No questions, no explanations, just build a roof over it and forget everything. Later, the men in his unit began falling sick, most likely from radiation, and the sound Everett just played matches exactly what they heard on that mission. Suddenly, the mystery is no longer local, no longer accidental. It's something old, repeating itself, and hidden by the government for decades. From there, the story spirals deeper. Everett and Faye find old military tapes donated to the town library, tapes that contain the same frequency. They track down an old woman who reveals a story that changes everything. She says that years ago, a passenger train arrived at its destination completely empty, all the people gone. Days later, a mysterious woman appeared, claiming she had jumped from the train. She stayed briefly with a local family, and at night she would speak strange words in an unknown language, as if repeating something she couldn't control. Eventually, she stole a horse and disappeared. The old woman's own child would later speak those exact same words, his first language. She wrote them down, and one night, when a strange tone filled the sky, she read them aloud. Her son repeated them perfectly, as if he had always known them, and fell into a trance. Years later, he simply walked out of the house and vanished. For her, the connection is clear. These beings in the sky take people when they are isolated, while crowds are distracted, just as the town was gathered in the gym. They don't act randomly. They influence thoughts, manipulate behavior, and quietly erase whoever they choose. Before sending Everett and Faye away, she hands them the words she had preserved, asking them to record them, as if they were some kind of key. When they finally reach the outskirts of town, the truth is undeniable. Burned grass, trees scorched black, signs of other abductions already carried out that night. A smaller craft floats silently above the ground, and then something far larger descends from the sky. A ship so vast it feels impossible. The smaller object docks with it, light floods the clearing, and Everett, Faye, and the baby they tried to protect are swallowed whole. The basketball game ends. The town returns to normal, and nobody realizes what just happened. The final image is Everett's recorder, lying half buried in dirt, the only trace they ever existed. What makes this film so unsettling is the lore it implies, but never fully explains. The strange words function like a trigger, unlocking trance states in those who have already been touched by the phenomenon, almost like hybrids or marked bloodlines. The old woman is convinced her son was claimed because of that connection, just as others before him had been. The soldier's testimony ties it to a long history of cover-ups, radiation, and buried crafts, suggesting this is part of a cycle that has been happening for decades. And then there's the most terrifying implication of all, that these beings don't just abduct, They influence human culture itself, nudging us toward wars, shaping how we live, maybe even guiding our progress. This is why the film embodies cosmic horror so perfectly. There are no monsters chasing people down and no blood on the walls, only a presence so immense and indifferent that it can erase lives without anyone noticing. Everett and Faye aren't slaughtered, they aren't even remembered, they're simply gone, while the town carries on like nothing happened. That is the true terror of the cosmic, the realization that the universe doesn't need us, that something older and greater can decide our fate without effort, and that our stories can end in silence while the world never pauses to look up. The next film is The Empty Man, and I have to admit, I went into it expecting just another cheap horror about teenagers dying after playing with some urban legend, something like Bye Bye Man or Smile. But what I found was something completely different. Behind the surface of a slasher with a myth, this movie hides a dense philosophical and disturbing story about thought, existence, and what happens when an ancient consciousness decides to reach into our world. The story begins far from America, in 1995, in the mountains of Bhutan. A group of hikers cross a suspension bridge when one of them, Paul, hears a strange whistling sound. Drawn to it, he slips into a crevice and discovers a cave with what looks like an altar. At its center, the skeletal remains of some inhuman figure, hands broken in strange positions. Paul touches it and falls into a catatonic trance. His friends drag him to a nearby cabin, but the damage is done. The next days escalate, strange sounds in the night, visions of figures approaching, and finally a massacre. By day 3, Paul's presence brings death. His friends slaughter each other in brutal ways, as if controlled by something else. Only one survives, clutching the strange bone flute that lured Paul in. Then, the movie shifts. Missouri, 2018. Here we meet James LaSombra, an ex-cop who now runs a security store. He's a man marked by tragedy. His wife and son are dead, and although at first it seems like backstory, later we'll learn nothing in his life, is what it seems. James's neighbor Amanda comes to him, rambling about how nothing is real, and how freedom comes from embracing that emptiness. The next day she's gone, disappeared, leaving only a bloody message on her bathroom mirror. The empty man made me do it. James begins to investigate, stumbling onto Amanda's friends who tell him about the ritual of the empty man. You go to a bridge, blow into a bottle while thinking of him, and then, on the first day you hear him, on the second day you see him, on the third day, he takes you. Classic urban legend stuff, except in this story, the kids who played it start dying one by one. James follows the trail and discovers something much larger than a ghost story, a secretive group called the Pontifex Institute. Pontifex presents itself like a philosophical society, but what they actually are is a cult obsessed with manifesting thought into reality. They believe consciousness is not limited to our brains, but forms part of something greater. An infosphere, they call the noosphere, the sum of all thoughts, human and non-human, stretching back before time itself. And among those thoughts live ancient hostile intelligences. The Institute's goal is to bring one of them through into our world, and to do that, they need a bridge, a vessel. They call it the Empty Man. At first, James thinks Amanda was recruited, maybe manipulated, but the more he digs, the more things stop making sense. He discovers files about himself in the Institute, files that describe his life in detail, but pieced together from other people's stories, as if his memories were assembled, not lived. He learns about a comatose man who's been kept alive for 23 years since the events in Bhutan. Paul, the original accidental vessel. He was too fragile to contain the other, the being from the noosphere. So the Institute began a new experiment. They created a man from scratch, not born, but manifested. James. His entire past, his grief, even the death of his family were scripted tragedies written by Pontifex to shape him into the perfect carrier. By the end, Amanda tells him the truth. He is not real. He is the experiment. Pontifex thought him into existence, constructed his memories, and now he is ready to host the entity. The comatose Paul is failing, and James is the replacement. The visions, the contradictions, the impossible gaps in his life, all of it clicks. When he confronts Paul in the hospital, the dying vessel collapses, and James feels the other enter him. The nurses and doctors kneel in silence. James La Sombra, the man who never truly existed, is now the prophet of an ancient consciousness. And this is where the empty man transforms from horror into pure cosmic dread. The story of teenagers dying after a ritual, that's just misdirection, the surface layer to get you comfortable. The real horror is ontological. James himself was never real. He is a thought given flesh, created only to be filled by something vast and alien. Imagine realizing your memories, your grief, your entire identity were fabricated by others, and that your only purpose was to serve as a doorway. That's the heart of cosmic horror, the destruction of the self, the revelation that human individuality is meaningless against forces far older and larger than us. Pontifex literally means bridge builder, and that's exactly what they do. They build a bridge between the world of thought and our physical reality, using James as the empty vessel. In Lovecraft's stories, cults try to awaken ancient gods sleeping beneath the sea or in the stars. Here, the god doesn't need to rise. It simply walks into the vessel they created, rewriting reality in the process. This film leaves us with no catharsis, no hero to fight back. James accepts the other, and the world accepts James. The true terror is not that the entity has come, but that it was already here, shaping us, waiting for the right body to walk among us. I'll be honest, The Mist is the Stephen King adaptation that rattled me the most. Scarier than the book, meaner than you expect, and absolutely ruthless in how it treats people once the lights go out. Stephen King doesn't need an introduction. The guy practically prints books like churros, some brilliant, some middling. But his horror changed the genre and raised a generation of writers. Cinema has been mining his pages for decades. The Shining, Misery, Carrie, Stand By Me, IT, The Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile. And then there's The Mist, 2007, Frank Darabont's Little Apocalypse. Same Darabont of The Green Mile and the early seasons of The Walking Dead. You'll even spot several familiar faces from that show drifting through the aisles. We're in small-town New England, King's natural habitat, Hello, Maine, the place where America keeps its ghost stories, Salem witch, lore not far away, the broader Lovecraft vibe hanging in the air. A storm rips through the night. At dawn, David Drayton takes his son and a neighbor to the supermarket for a boring, post-disaster restock. And then it hits, a white wall crawling in from the parking lot. A man staggers inside, blood down his shirt, screaming that there's something in the fog, doors slam, the windows turn into mirrors. Ordinary life ends in aisle 3. Two choices make the movie feel uncomfortably real. First, the camera, loose, gliding, almost documentarian, slipping from face to face as if we're one more trapped customer. It never goes full shaky cam a la Blair Witch. It just breathes like a news crew that didn't plan to see the end of the world today. Second, the sound, or better, the lack of it. Minimal score. Long stretches of humming silence. It's that jungle instinct. When everything stops chirping, something's hunting. And then, the things inside the mist. Darabont gives the novella a cosmic spine, the Arrowhead Project, a nearby military experiment that peeked into higher dimensions and pried the window too far open. That's straight out of Lovecraft's From Beyond. The idea that there are layers of reality stacked on ours, and if you tune the wrong dial, you don't just see what lives there, you invite it in. The film even does the classic dimensional analogy. Imagine a 2D world on a sheet of paper. Its inhabitants can't perceive depth. Now flip the page. That's us when something 4D brushes our 3D room. What slips through the seam is wrong in a biological way. Tentacles with barbs that shouldn't be there. Insect things with the scale turned up to nightmare. Shapes that borrow from octopi and arachnids but feel designed by a geometry that hates us. And yet, the most upsetting scene isn't a monster money shot. It's a rope. A guy swears there's a shotgun in his truck and volunteers to sprint through the fog. They tie a line around his waist and feed it out as he goes. The rope slacks, tenses, goes slack again, and then yanks upward at an impossible angle, screaming through palms, burning skin. When they finally haul it back, all they get is a blood-slick line and half a man. cosmic horror in a knot. Something grabbed him that doesn't obey our rules. King's secret weapon, though, is turning the mundane into the abyss, shopping with your kid, fluorescent lights, carts squeaking. He takes that safe routine and corrupts it one step at a time until the scariest thing in the film isn't outside. It's the people inside with you. The supermarket becomes a micro-civilization. In hours, it fractures. Rationalists versus deniers versus true believers. Mrs. Carmody, a zealot who smells blood and prophecy, gathers a flock. Fear needs a leader. Fanaticism offers a script. Soon they're calling for sacrifices to placate whatever's in the mist. It's Lord of the Flies with coupons. This is where the mist stops being a creature feature and becomes a mirror. Our social order looks sturdy because of police, power, and predictability. Strip those away, and the animal steps forward. You see how fast Neighbors Forever becomes, "You're not with us." That's horror number 1. Civilization is a costume. Horror number 2 is bigger. The universe doesn't care what's under it. Darabont's ending is infamous because it weaponizes both truths. David, a handful of survivors, and a near-empty tank of gas crawl through the white void. They stop. 4 bullets, 5 people. The sounds out there promise a death no one should watch. David does the math a parent should never do and takes it on himself. The gun cracks 4 times. He steps out, ready to be torn apart, and the fog thins. Tanks rumble out of the whiteness. Soldiers, flamethrowers, trucks full of rescued townspeople. Salvation arrives 60 seconds late. That last punch is where the film becomes pure cosmic horror. Not because a tentacled god appears, but because of how indifferent timing is. The universe isn't a morality play. There is no right choice that guarantees a good outcome. In the cosmic scale, our decisions are gnats in a hurricane. David wasn't punished. He was irrelevant. That's why King himself admitted the movie terrified him, because it's cruel in the way reality can be cruel, quietly, pointlessly. I've got to be honest, They Remain is one of those movies that people love to hate. If you check reviews online, it gets trashed. IMDb scores in the gutter, Letterboxd full of comments calling it boring, nonsense, or a waste of time. And yeah, on the surface I get it. It's stupidly weird. It refuses to play by the normal rules of horror cinema. But that's exactly the reason it's worth paying attention to. Because when you look closer, this is one of the purest attempts to translate modern cosmic horror to the screen. The setup is simple. 2 researchers, a man and a woman, are sent to a remote forest where a violent cult once carried out rituals, murders, and eventually self-destruction. Their task seems mechanical. Study animal patterns, collect data for a corporate client, and report findings. No mystery box, no detective story. Just isolation, wilderness, and the ghosts of something terrible that happened there. But from the start, there's this gnawing feeling that the land itself hasn't recovered, that it's holding on to whatever the cult worshipped. This is where the movie leans heavily on its source material, a short story by Laird Barron, who, if you've read him, you know is basically one of the modern titans of cosmic horror. He doesn't write about jump scares or gore. His stories focus on erosion, human beings being worn down until the line between perception and reality collapses, and They Remain nails that atmosphere. You get long, lingering shots of the forest where nothing happens, but you can feel the silence pushing down. The sound design makes the woods breathe. It's not haunted by ghosts in the traditional sense. It feels haunted by indifference, by the weight of something ancient and impersonal. That's why so many people find the movie bad. It's not delivering catharsis. There's no big confrontation, no satisfying answer, no clear depiction of what's wrong. And that's deliberate. Cosmic horror, at its core, isn't about giving you the monster. It's about confronting you with the possibility that the monster doesn't care if you see it or not. It's bigger than that. As the 2 researchers stay longer, their relationship starts to fracture. They're professionals, rational, grounded in science, but paranoia seeps in. They argue about trust, about what they've seen, about whether the cult's presence lingers in the soil, and the more they fight, the more you realize the forest doesn't need to attack them directly. It just needs to amplify their own weaknesses until they implode. That's straight barren. Horror as psychological attrition. As if the environment itself has decided that you don't belong. Visually, the movie plays tricks on you. You catch glimpses of symbols, strange shapes in the distance, flickers of something impossible on the edge of the frame. But you're never allowed the comfort of certainty. Did you actually see something? Or are you falling into the same paranoid spiral as the characters? That's where it connects perfectly to Lovecraft's tradition. Think of The Color Out of Space or The Whisperer in Darkness. Stories where the horror isn't a monster leaping out, but the creeping realization that reality itself has cracks, and you're staring through them. What I love most is how They Remain takes the most ordinary setting, a forest, two people doing field work, and turns it into a stage for cosmic dread. It strips away the cliches of horror. There's no haunted house, no demonic possession, no cursed artifact, just nature. And yet it feels hostile, overwhelming, like it's been touched by something far older than humanity. That's exactly what Barron's writing insists on. The wilderness itself, especially in North America, is a living tomb for forces we can't comprehend. By the end, you don't get resolution. You don't get a reveal that explains everything. You're left with disorientation, confusion, and the sense that something enormous brushed against the edges of the story and kept moving. And that's the genius of it. It's not a fun horror film. It's not the kind of movie you watch for entertainment. It's a slow-burn descent into the logic of cosmic horror, where meaning collapses, where your perception betrays you, and where the universe offers no explanation, no comfort, and no closure. So, yeah, critics call it a mess. Audiences walk out frustrated. But if you understand what it's doing, They Remain is almost a perfect expression of the genre. Because in cosmic horror, the scariest thing isn't that you die. It's that you never understand why. The Lighthouse is one of those films people either dismiss as pretentious or become completely obsessed with, and there's a good reason for that. At its core, the story is simple. Two men stranded on a small rock in the middle of the ocean, tasked with maintaining a lighthouse. But Eggers doesn't treat this as a survival story. He treats it as a descent into myth, into madness, and into something that feels much older than cinema itself. The movie throws you into a setting that already feels alien. Shot in black and white, framed in a tight 1.19 to 1 aspect ratio, everything looks unnatural, claustrophobic, almost archival, as if you're not watching a movie but a fragment of forbidden footage. The atmosphere is oppressive before anything even happens. We follow Ephraim Winslow, played by Robert Pattinson. As he arrives at the island to work under Thomas Wake, Willem Dafoe's old, domineering lighthouse keeper. Right away, the hierarchy is clear. Wake is a tyrant. He hoards the sacred duty of tending the light for himself, leaving Winslow to do the degrading, back-breaking labor, hauling coal, cleaning filth, emptying chamber pots. The work is humiliating, and the way Wake constantly mocks him turns their relationship into something closer to master and servant than two men sharing a job. But the real fracture begins with superstition. Wake warns Winslow never to harm the gulls, claiming they carry the souls of dead sailors. When Winslow brutally kills one in a fit of anger, the punishment begins immediately. The winds turn, a storm rolls in, and the island becomes a prison. From that point forward, reality itself bends. The visions Winslow experiences blur the line between dream and waking life. A mermaid with a body that looks both alluring and grotesque, tentacles sliding into impossible places, even glimpses of Wake himself as a sea god. The ocean is no longer just a backdrop. It becomes a character, a force of will. Sound design amplifies this. The horn of the lighthouse groans like a beast, the waves crash with unnatural weight, and silence lingers at moments when silence feels most wrong. Eggers isn't subtle about the mythological skeleton underneath. Wake resembles Proteus, the prophetic sea god, ancient and cruel, while Winslow's story mirrors Prometheus, the mortal who steals forbidden fire. The lantern, guarded jealously by Wake, is treated like a holy relic. Winslow's obsession with it grows until it consumes him. And when he finally reaches it, when he dares to stare into the light, the punishment is absolute. Knowledge burns him alive, the light devours his sanity. And in one of the most disturbing final images in modern horror, we see him naked, sprawled on the rocks, his flesh being eaten by gulls, his defiance rewarded with eternal torment. But the film works on another axis too, the psychological. The isolation strips away every layer of civility, leaving behind nothing but resentment, paranoia, and unspoken desires. Their relationship swings wildly, moments of drunken intimacy that almost feel like love, followed by sudden violence and betrayal. Eggers plays on repressed masculinity, showing how proximity and dependence mutate power, struggles into something deeply uncomfortable. Are they enemies, companions, lovers, or reflections of each other's madness? The film refuses to say because in isolation, those boundaries collapse. Then there's the Lovecraftian dimension. The mermaid isn't just a hallucination. Her uncanny and human face suggests something older, something that belongs to the sea's hidden depths. The tentacles inside the lantern, glimpsed for only seconds, hint at an impossible truth. The light may not be divine at all, but alive. The island feels like a thin space, a place where the human world brushes against something incomprehensible. Like Lovecraft's best stories, the terror doesn't come from what you see, but from the suggestion that there is a logic here, far older and far more alien than anything we can understand. What makes the Lighthouse cosmic horror isn't that it shows you a monster, it's that it makes you realize how fragile sanity is, how isolation and obsession open the door to forces we're not built to handle. The men fall apart, not just because of each other, but because the world around them refuses to stay human. The sea, the light, the storm, all of it feels like part of a consciousness that wants them broken. And in the end, you're left with that image of Winslow's body torn apart by gulls, a punishment straight out of Greek myth, echoing the fate of Prometheus, but also a perfect image of cosmic horror, man reduced to carrion, consumed by forces older than language, while the world carries on indifferent. Resolution looks like nothing special at first glance. Two guys in a rundown cabin, one of them handcuffed to a pipe while his best friend forces him to detox. It sounds like a character drama with a bleak setup, and for the first few minutes, that's all it seems to be. But then the film starts dropping fragments that don't belong. Old photographs, decaying VHS tapes, scratched DVDs, even digital files lying around in the woods. Each of them shows pieces of other stories that happen nearby. People arguing, overdosing, dying, and slowly those clips shift from strangers to something far worse. They start showing Mike and Chris themselves, filmed from angles that should be impossible. That's the moment when you realize the camera isn't just our perspective anymore. It has become a character, or rather, a presence. From there, everything spirals. The woods seem littered with evidence of previous narratives, failed versions of the same story playing out in different forms. And the more Mike tries to understand, the more obvious it becomes that something is orchestrating this, leaving artifacts like breadcrumbs. A box that wasn't there suddenly appears when the camera pans back. A photograph materializes at Mike's feet while he sleeps. A single shoe appears in the doorway with no explanation. No one is placing these items because no one else is there, except us, the audience. Every tape they watch has the same structure, a beginning, a middle, and an end, always circling back to violence. Mike even voices it directly, admitting that it feels like whatever is behind this wants a story with an ending. He doesn't understand the full weight of that line, but we do. That's where the film reveals itself as pure cosmic horror. There's no ghost or demon to fight. The antagonist is narrative itself, a force that demands resolution, reshaping events until they satisfy its need for closure. We, the viewers, are complicit because the entity is essentially us. We sit down expecting a horror film, and the characters bend under that weight. Every time they try to improvise or survive, new footage appears, another possible ending, and the cycle continues. By the time they beg for another chance in the final scene, they're not pleading with some faceless god in the woods. They're speaking directly to the audience that has been watching them suffer all along. That's what makes Resolution so disturbing. The low budget, the quiet pacing, the awkward silences all disguise what's really happening until it's too late. The film lures you into wanting something to happen. And the moment you feel that impatience, the entity obliges. It feeds on our need for story, on our hunger for horror, on the fact that we won't leave satisfied unless the narrative resolves. The title is the punchline. Resolution doesn't just refer to Mike trying to fix his friend. It's the word for the only thing the entity cares about: the ending, the closure, the shape of a story. And when the screen cuts to black, you realize the characters never had a chance, because the moment we pressed play, their fates were already sealed. Richard Stanley takes one of Lovecraft's most unfilmable stories and drags it straight into the modern age without losing the dread at its core. The Gardner family lives out on an isolated farm, surrounded by woods, water, and silence. Nathan, the father, has this dream of rural independence, a life rebuilt after his wife Teresa's recent cancer surgery. Their kids, Lavinia, Benny, and Jack, each orbit their own worlds: Wiccan rituals, astronomy, late-night TV. The place feels cut off, but alive. And then the meteorite hits. It comes from nowhere. No build-up, no fanfare, just a blinding flash in the sky and a crater steaming in the front yard. At first, it feels like a freak accident, something local authorities will cart away while the family stares at the hole for a week and then moves on. Except, they never do. The meteorite leaks color, a shade so unnatural it feels like your eyes shouldn't be seeing it. That's deliberate. Magenta doesn't exist on the real light spectrum. It's an illusion the brain invents when it doesn't know how to process certain wavelengths. From the moment that color appears, reality itself starts breaking down, not violently, but like a slow infection. The first symptoms come through the water. Hydrologist Ward Phillips arrives to test the well, and his results keep getting stranger. Contamination levels off the charts, readings that make no sense. The Gardner family keeps drinking it. The crops mutate. The tomatoes grow big, shiny, and completely inedible. Animals start behaving erratically. Time itself slips. Hours vanish without anyone noticing. And then the changes get physical. Teresa, already weakened by illness, cuts off her own fingers in the kitchen without realizing it. Jack claims he can hear voices coming from the well. Benny watches the sky like something is staring back. Nathan himself starts flipping between moods, accents, even personalities, as if the thing in the ground is rewriting his brain mid-sentence. The animals go first. The family's alpacas, the pride of Nathan's farm, melt into a single screaming mass of flesh and bone, straight out of the thing. But the film saves its most disturbing moment for the attic. Teresa and little Jack fuse together into one writhing, breathing organism, half human, half something else. No attack, no explanation. Just mutation swallowing identity whole. What makes The Color Out of Space terrifying isn't what it shows, but what it refuses to explain. The thing from the meteorite never speaks. It never demands. It just spreads through soil, water, air, electricity, even light itself. The neighbor Ezra becomes a warning sign, his cabin filled with static as his recordings pick up whispers under the noise. By the time Ward finds him, Ezra is a burned silhouette still talking through a tape deck, like the signal itself hollowed him out. Lavinia, desperate, turns to ritual magic, carving symbols into her skin, as if old belief systems could fight something that doesn't even notice her. Science can't stop it. Faith can't stop it. The military shows up far too late. The infection keeps spreading because it doesn't care about sides or motives or morality. And then there's the vision in the well. Ward sees it, just for a moment. A world of impossible geometry. Towers of crystal and flesh under skies that don't belong here. The thing isn't invading Earth the way humans invade each other. It isn't even alive in the way we understand life. It's a fragment of somewhere else, a reality whose rules erase ours on contact. By the end, the Gardner farm is ash and silence. No answers, no survivors, just a contaminated reservoir feeding the towns beyond. Ward, the lone witness, promises he'll never drink the water because he's seen what's inside it. And that's what makes this story pure Lovecraft. The thing from space isn't evil. It isn't good. It doesn't even recognize the difference. The horror comes from realizing the universe runs on rules we'll never understand. And when those rules shift, we disappear, whether we're ready or not. On paper, Event Horizon starts like standard sci-fi, a rescue crew sent to investigate a spaceship that vanished near Neptune 7 years ago. But the moment the Lewis and Clark approaches the derelict vessel, the movie shifts from science fiction into something far colder. A story where space itself stops feeling like a frontier and starts feeling like a trap. The ship in question, the Event Horizon, was designed with an experimental gravity drive that could fold space-time, creating artificial wormholes for faster-than-light travel. Its maiden voyage was supposed to be the dawn of a new era. Instead, it disappeared without a trace the first time it jumped. And now, it's back, drifting in orbit, sending out a single transmission, screams buried under static, words in Latin half lost in the distortion. From the moment the crew boards, everything feels wrong. The ship is pristine but lifeless, like a cathedral gutted of faith but still echoing with whispers. And at its center, the gravity drive, a rotating sphere of metal rings and black liquid, feels less like an engine and more like an altar. Every design choice screams ritual rather than technology, as if the ship's creator built a machine to tear through reality without caring what waited on the other side. The crew starts piecing things together through fragments, logs showing the original team descending into violence and madness, blood smeared on walls in patterns that don't look random, hallucinations that hit each new arrival in ways that cut straight to the bone. One sees a dead wife accusing him of leaving her. Another sees a child burned and limbless. The ship knows what to show them because it isn't just haunted, it's alive, and whatever it brought back understands pain intimately. The implication becomes unavoidable. The event horizon didn't just travel through space, it tore through somewhere else, a dimension described only as pure chaos, pure evil. The Latin phrase hidden in the original distress call isn't a plea for rescue, but a warning. Liberate tudimet ex inferis, save yourselves from hell. But this isn't hell in any religious sense. No demons with horns or flames waiting with pitchforks. What came back through the gate feels closer to Lovecraft than Dante. A dimension of infinite cruelty where human minds break instantly, where suffering isn't punishment, but the natural language of the place. The crew doesn't need monsters stalking them because the ship itself is the monster, both doorway and weapon, showing them what lies beyond because it wants them to see. The captain of the original mission fused with this thing, body and mind, becoming its voice. When he reappears, skin flayed, eyes burned out, he doesn't preach revenge or conquest. He just speaks with the calm of something that has seen too much, promising to take everyone back with him, to show them. The final act descends into carnage, fire, blood, crew members mutilating themselves or each other under hallucinations so vivid they might as well be real. But the real horror lands in the quiet moments. The engine spinning in darkness, the ship patiently watching, the sense that even if the survivors escape, the door is still open. And that's why Event Horizon works as cosmic horror rather than just sci-fi splatter. The fear doesn't come from gore or jump scares, but from scale. From the realization that humanity built a bridge to somewhere it was never meant to see, crossed it without hesitation, and came back carrying a fragment of a place that erases sanity by existing. The movie never gives that dimension a name because it doesn't need one. That's the point. Some things don't fit language. They just wait for someone curious enough to open the wrong door. Well, guys, that wraps up today's deep dive into the most disturbing corners of cosmic horror cinema. These films stay in your mind because they go beyond monsters or jump scares. They pull you into something much larger, something that keeps echoing long after the credits end. I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments which of these movies hit you the hardest, or if there's another cosmic horror gem that should be in the next video. And if you enjoy exploring stories that twist reality and leave you questioning everything, stick around. There's a lot more coming, and each one gets stranger than the last.